assume everything can spread. So if you have sending one message internally to employees about your metrics, how you're doing, if sending another to your investors, sending another out to the public, eventually you're going to get caught with it. Everything needs to be beneficial, helpful. If you're just putting out an ad, that's not going to do it. If you can put out one or two really helpful posts, things that explain what you do, everything just needs to be helpful. And from there, then we start promoting. So that's where you start creating the content around what will be useful. So maybe you do, paid ads, but it's paid ads for people to see your retirement calculator tool or your nonprofit, accounting, business checklist. If you're a nonprofit, you're starting a nonprofit, you need all these things, and we have this checklist tool that's for you.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to The Business Game, a podcast that moves the needle. Before we get started today, don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. Welcome to today's episode of The Business Game. I'm your host, Jaimie, and I'm here with Dan.
Hello, everyone.
And today we have the amazing Joshua from Beltway Media. How are you, Joshua?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Now, before we jump into all the hard-hitting questions of what you actually do, give us a brief description of who you are, what you do, and how you can probably help listeners that are tuning in.
Yeah. So what we do here at Beltway Media is we are fractional chief communications officers. So what that means is that we focus on two big things: shaping perception and building and maintaining trust, which is a lot of what we do in communications. And so that covers a tremendous amount. And unlike someone who's, a chief marketing officer, a chief brand officer, which are essential things that corporations and businesses should have, we look at all of those things together. So we are taking that big picture view of how messaging affects reputation and stakeholder confidence and consistency across channels, internal channels and external channels.
Okay, so in my deep dive of research on you and your business, Beltway, Beltway Media talks about blending behavioral science with analytics. So what does that actually look like in practice?
So thankfully, a lot of these digital tools make that a lot easier than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because if you send out a newsletter, if you put in, Google Analytics code, it's tracking behavior, which also it's tracking behavior. But you have that data that your consumers, your users are giving you. So you know where they're clicking. One example, I was working on a newsletter for a healthcare professional. And she had this newsletter, great content that she was putting out a couple times a month, but people opened it and no one was clicking. No one was getting to her articles. No one was buying her workshops from the newsletter, which is why we came in for that. And what we did was, sent out a couple just how they were, same content, make no changes, kind of get that baseline, with us there. And from that, we were able to see, okay, you're getting these open rates, but you don't have links, where the links aren't where people are clicking. We can see people are clicking on your pictures, but you only have links in your titles.
Yeah.
So we were able to look at that and really look at very granular data, to the individual recipient level.
Yeah.
And see how we could use that and take those behaviors and then get them to do more. So where we would do things is like moving her online shop, those links to courses, put them, higher up in the newsletter, have one featured article and then other things below it, rearrange the layout to really get to how her audience and her users were engaging. Because yes, there are basic general trends that we know.
That's what I was going to ask. Was that her business specific or that industry, or is that just a general trend? Because I know I click on anything looking for
Yeah.
something to give me more information myself.
Most people do. Most people, if they, they're like, we know by now, 2025,
Yeah.
how this, as consumers, we know. And, yes, I sit here and I'm talking to you, you guys do this, but we're also consumers and get newsletters and emails and all the same things we're sending out.
Yeah.
So a lot of people do click more than once. They'll try the title. If something has a hint like read more, learn more, that's kind of a clue. But most people won't go through everything. After 2 or 3, okay, it doesn't work, moving on, next thing. But in hers, I mean, we had some large pictures. That's just the biggest thing. So that's going to draw people's eye. That's going to draw their
Yeah.
attention. And it just looks like a big thing to click.
Yeah. Fair. Now, you've also mentioned that the days of siloing audiences are over. Why is this, and what is replacing that approach?
Yeah. So you used to 50 plus years ago,
Yeah.
you pretty much knew you had your newsstands, your front pages, everyone would see it. And of course, that still exists in a way. But when you're talking about those silos, that was much more controlled. So you weren't going to have everything be available to everyone 100% of the time. So if you are working and you have, investor relations documents, if you're any size business, public or private, those can end up much easier than 50 years ago on that newsstand front page, because someone could just take their cell phone, snap a picture of their screen, and now they have a copy of it.
Yeah.
So assume everything can spread. So if you have sending one message internally to employees about your metrics, how you're doing, if sending another to your investors, sending another out to the public, eventually you're going to get caught with it. Maybe not the first time, but eventually it's going to catch up, because your employees are obviously going to see it all. And they're like, wait, this doesn't match that.
Yeah.
And again, anyone with a cell phone could just take a picture and send it off to any Twitter, X, Blue Sky, Reddit, blog account, and then you're off to the races.
Okay. So how is that measured then now? How are they measuring these actual metrics? If just to break it down further, if people are, as you said, taking a photo with their phone or whatever, and it's going out that way, how are we measuring, or how are we able to measure things like that?
Well, you hope no one's doing that in your case, because that means they're leaking information you don't want leaked.
Yeah.
So you really hope that people aren't just taking pictures of their screens and sending documents out into the world. But there are other ways. So media monitoring tools are great for that. You can set up keywords, do mentions. AI can do that also, can do it relatively well at a relatively lower price than some of the very expensive media monitoring tools, if you set your prompts and parameters carefully. So that's one way. Another is, I hate to say it, a basic Google News alert has, a lot of mileage with it. If something's out there, it won't get you something on Twitter or X. It will, however, tell you what's in the news.
Yep.
So you can get that. You can get feeds from social media and set those keywords up. So there are a lot of different ways to be aware of what's going
on. Okay.
Joshua, just out of curiosity, if I were involved in a new startup and I wasn't sure about my consumer behavior, are you able to help just with getting us started? Like, would you set a baseline, like you said before, with a newsletter, or would you go for social media, or what's the best way to approach it?
It depends on what behavior you're interested in. So if you want to know their purchasing patterns, we're a communications firm. We do chief communications officer. We're not going to take you through a store and, have people look at shelves. But if you're that startup and you're not sure where to get information out about your product, that's something we can definitely help with. And sometimes we're going to start with what you have. Okay. So in a lot of cases, that might be you guys have been running, a Facebook or an Instagram or a TikTok or whatever, all of them. Some cases, and I don't get these often, they do come up. Someone says, we're a blank slate, we have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Just go.
Is that
And
best
in
case
that
scenario
case,
for you?
for me, we love it. If
Yeah.
someone just says, we're a blank slate,
Yep.
take us, because you don't have to undo anything and you don't necessarily have to make changes.
Yeah.
So you're also
So
interested in the public image. So you can
Yeah.
set that an initial public image and run with it, and then work out consumer behaviors with that image as well.
Yes, well, public and private, because we also do things like employee internal communications, investor relations. If you're going for a fundraising round, pitch decks are important. They're, how you start the conversation. So those are, things, social media, that's public. But also your investors, before they spend money on you, they're going to check that. You're not, I'm sure this happens where someone sees an amazing pitch deck and writes a check. It's an eventuality that could happen. I'm sure at some point it either has or will. It's usually a place that conversation starts.
Okay.
So they're going to do a lot of research before spending money on a company.
Yeah. So if you have a startup come to you and they're like, we're a blank slate, all we've got basically is our website. We've done our website.
Mm-hmm.
We're happy with it. Where do you take them from there?
Well, it's going to see, the first question is probably going to be something like, who do you need to reach?
Mm-hmm.
Are you, a B2C? Are you an app? Everything you do is just download an app. Do you have a physical product? Do you have a thing, a widget? That's a little harder because, we know we could get you a free trial of an app and put it in someone's hands. People have been doing that now for more than a decade.
Yeah.
That's a pretty routine, tried and true process. Getting people to pick up a widget, that's a lot harder because they either got to ship it or pick it up somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're going to figure out with them is, what do you need someone to do? Especially if maybe you have a widget, but you need to raise money to actually produce one of them. You maybe have, a working prototype, but you're not able to produce them in the hundreds or thousands yet.
Sure.
So your goal is raising money, which is very different than getting people to try out your thing. So we're going to really spend a lot of time on, what are your goals, long-term goals? Where's your goal a year, 2 years, 5 years from now? And what is your goal right now? Okay. What do we need to accomplish? And even then, it's usually something like, I want to raise money. Of course, that's what startups want to do in most cases. Mm-hmm. They're going to break that down further. Okay, you want to raise money. What do you need? From where? How much? What can we do? So that might be changing websites. It might be thought leadership. It might be going on podcasts, really just building up their profile, especially if they don't necessarily have one yet.
So if we're a few years in and we have a little bit of negative communication out there in the public and privately as well,
mm-hmm.
what do you do? Do you make future adjustments, or do you go back and try to address what's happened in the past, or it's a combination
what's the mitigation of that?
A combination of both, and it depends on what was negative. If it was, people didn't like version 1 of your app, okay, we have version 2, 3, we're now on 4. Yeah. But people might still have that perception of version 1 in their head that people didn't like. So that might be a rebranding, because everyone knows they don't like Acme Corp app, but maybe they like the Beltway app instead. So it's just like, that might be as simple as rebranding it to change that perception. If you have, problems with, maybe financial mismanagement, poor leadership, things like that, which might hurt, chances of raising a next fundraising round, that is going to be much harder because, kind of like I said before, you get away with things for so long. Same idea. You might be able to get away with covering up and changing the story and putting out positive information, which you absolutely need to do. But someone's going to say, well, do we still have, the people who kind of caused the problems in the first place?
Yeah.
That, created the challenges. And if this actual issue hasn't been addressed, you could have the best communications in the world. Eventually, it won't be enough. It might be enough for a while, but not forever.
So, what's your recommendation in a world now where, it feels like social media is king, and how we get our brand and the trust of that brand out there into the world? What do you do when something does go, I guess, viral in a bad way? How do you then come back and rein that back in and try and mitigate it? How, when it's out there?
Yeah. That's probably what most people are kind of afraid of, is
Yeah.
something that gets out there. And you basically have three choices in that situation. The first is the one most people try to avoid, although it can be beneficial, is you just own it.
Yep.
Just whatever happened, your product, started taking pictures, on the front facing camera every time someone used it, and nothing bad happened. They didn't get leaked. All it was found was people were taking the pictures. You can maybe own that and maybe give people the chance to see the pictures of themselves, make a contest out of it, do something to just spin that better.
Yeah. Okay.
Option two, which happens frequently and sometimes maybe too frequently, ignore it, hope it will go away. There will be some new cool scandal by the afternoon, usually.
Bury head
So-
in sand and pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah, just hope that this does not become the focus.
Yeah.
And then option three is really focus on putting out, a lot of positive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just unrelated, just here are all the great things we're doing. Here's our feature release schedule. Here's our great new hires. Here's, the conference we attended, and just start putting out everything positive that you can. You could do 1 and 3 at the same time,
Yeah.
because you usually have to. You just got to get positive stuff out there, because if people are searching, okay, well, we got to give them something that comes up first that isn't really bad.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think as humans, we always remember the negative of something that
Yes.
stays at the forefront. But you can push out 100 fantastic things, but you're going to remember that negative thing.
I'm just thinking politicians
Yes.
right now. I got
Oh,
stuck in my
gosh.
head. I can just
Yeah.
imagine about image and trying to own it and making a mess of it even further, or
Yeah.
ignoring it. And I guess a lot of politicians will get away with that. But anyway, I
yeah.
don't want to go down that path.
I think politicians are fantastic at ignoring it.
Oh yeah, for sure. In Australia, at least.
Yeah,
Yes,
definitely.
in the US too.
Yeah.
I started my career as a political journalist. So
Oh, nice one, Dan.
You missed that?
it was fun. I enjoyed doing it. I enjoy what I do now also.
Yeah,
Good.
fair. Just while we're sort of on the chatting about sort of like campaigns, what is the key to building a media campaign that resonates both online and offline?
And do you have an example with a client?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would definitely say you might have two different campaigns.
Yep.
You might have an online campaign and an offline campaign
Mm-hmm.
that are kind of running parallel to each other. One I could think of was with a managed service provider who I work with. And, they basically had a captive audience for, who was always going to walk by their office and see them. But we also wanted to make sure they got other people.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we do that? Okay, they have this basically help desk that they've set up, and just providing information, that's offline. We're also giving them on their social channels, on their website, just a lot of content. And what I think is, everything needs to be that useful,
Yeah.
beneficial, helpful. If you're just putting out an ad, that's not going to do it, because we see ads so often. We have devices designed to block them.
Mhm.
So people are avoiding ads. But if you have things like guides that help people, and that's what we were putting out for them, on LinkedIn, things like corporate IT guides,
Mhm.
things you need at this stage, founder stage, 5-employee stage, going up. These are beneficial for you. That's something that pretty easy to produce and gets their name out there in a way that people remember them and remember, hey, these guys are helpful.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna pull from this because I always do, because Dan is trained in, you're an accountant. Is that's you are is that what we call you, an accountant?
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a money man.
Yeah.
If you had
Finance. Yeah.
if you had an accountancy firm come to you,
Mhm.
clean slate, where
Clean
do you
slate.
lead them? What do you say? Right, this
Well-
is in your perfect world as a media business that can create
Mhm.
this amazing thing for them. Where do you lead them? What is your plan for a business like that?
What's in my head,
Well-
Joshua, is some people get told, or businesses get told, to put 3-4 social media posts out every week, and a lot of it's just rubbish. Is that what you're
Yeah.
talking about, or you're talking about trying to create an overall image, or?
No, I definitely don't want things that go out that are trash,
Yeah.
because people remember then, okay, that's the trash company. We don't want that.
Yeah.
But if you can put out 1 or 2 really helpful posts, things that explain what you do, then that's something that people would probably benefit from. So if you're an accountant, the first thing I would ask is, who are your clients? Are you families? Are you people near retirement doing financial planning? All you do are accountants for nonprofits? I know people who that's what they use.
Mm-hmm.
Accounting firm, all they do is accounting just for nonprofits. So all those are going to be very different from each other.
Yeah.
So I'd figure out who that target audience is. And then from there, figure out what are the pain points the people who come to this accounting firm need resolved. And then what can we put out there that's generic enough that it could apply to 90% of the prospective clients.
Okay.
So if you are helping, soon to be retirees, what would be beneficial for as many of them as possible? What do they need to know? Do you have a free tool or calculator on your website that we can create that, or if we don't have one, we can create one that will help people in some way? Because that's what I think, everything just needs to be helpful. And from there, then we start promoting it. So that's where you start creating the content around what will be useful. So maybe you do, paid ads, but it's paid ads for people to see your retirement calculator tool or your nonprofit, accounting, business checklist. If you're a nonprofit, you're starting a nonprofit, you need all these things. And we have this checklist tool that's for you. I just put 2 of them on my website, one specifically for cybersecurity communications, one for startup communications, and there'll be more coming soon. Just quick, yes, no questions. That's the kind of thing that provides value to people.
It's
And
simplicity,
then
isn't
you can
it?
do more. Yeah, a lot of things don't need to be that complicated,
Mm.
because we are bombarded with a lot of messaging these days.
Yeah.
If you could do something simple that people understand, you might have a better shot. And I say might because some things work, some things don't. Try it. If it doesn't work, move on. Come back in 6 months, try it again. It could have been the timing was wrong. That was it. Maybe work the next time. So definitely always, be ready to pivot, but also to understand that it's not all going to work 100% of the time. It's not math. 1 + 1 does not equal 2 for
Mm.
this. It's input, and input again will get you some output, and hopefully it works.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, we adjust and we try again. The fancy word for it, we'll call it A/B testing, but it's really a lot of finding what works and eventually hitting on a formula and going.
Cool.
You mentioned paid advertising,
Mhm.
and I've been dying to have someone on that can hopefully explain to me what's going on in the world. I have a love-hate relationship with Google and everything to do with anything that I have to do in the back end of advertising with Google. But what has come out recently is that so SEO has been king for forever,
Yeah.
right? But now with the introduction of AI, and I know myself, I am using AI as my search engine per se.
Yeah, a lot of people are.
Yeah. So now there's AEO, which for those that don't know is answer engine optimization, and GEO, which is generative engine optimization. How do people start with their ads catering to AEO and GEO as well as SEO? And is SEO still the most important of these three, or is I would assume at some point AEO is going to take over, but when do we think that might happen? How do we know that it is at that point where, okay, SEO isn't what it used to be, now it's, AEO? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a lot of big questions.
Yeah, it is. Now, and if you can just put it into an answer that's, under
5 words long.
five words or less.
So I think it's going to happen in stages. You're going to see some types of consumers going much more to, an AI source before they go to, just Google search results.
Yeah.
And that might be certain demographics versus others. It might be people with, consumer questions where they're still kind of going to traditional Google searching for business questions. I say might be and maybe because, like everyone else, we're still kind of figuring out what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I don't think SEO will be dethroned all at once.
Right.
I think it will happen, over time, and it will still play a role. When things that you hear about with, optimizing for, things like Gemini, which is Google's AI, or ChatGPT, is content, well-placed content rules in those, because that's where it pulls from. Well, where's it getting the well-placed content from?
Yeah.
Probably, again, we don't have the back end of, these engines, but probably highly ranked Google pages.
Absolutely.
But a paid ad isn't going to rank that highly. The content, that tool that we created for the accounting firm, that might be what ranks highly. The article on their website about how to use the tool might rank highly. About what the answers mean could be something that comes up when someone goes to ChatGPT. What do I need to do to plan for retirement in Australia? That might be where they get that.
Yeah.
But the paid ad itself is just a product. That's just something people see.
Yeah. Hey, business game players, are you ready to level up your business? We are thrilled to announce our partnership with HubSpot, the ultimate all-in-one CRM platform. HubSpot helps you streamline marketing, sales, and customer service with powerful tools to grow your business faster. From lead generation to automation, it's got you covered. Visit HubSpot through our link below in the captions, or visit our website, thebusinessgamepodcast.com, to start for free and supercharge your success. Now, back to the game. So would it be safe to say for people that are, optimizing their websites and just whatever it may be, that they are going down the path now of optimizing it for SEO and AEO? Would that would it be encouraging to be like, okay, things are going to change, get ahead of the curve and start implementing these optimizations now?
Absolutely. And if you can, most things, hopefully, again, we don't know how the back end of these, AIs work, but probably you'll be able to, dual purpose a lot of things. What is the AI looking for? Good, reliable content. Yeah. That's what it spits out as the answer. So kind of a simple thing that, example that people kind of have all experienced is, they go to Google, they put in a recipe. Well, the recipe came up as the AI, the Gemini preview answer. They're not clicking anywhere. They're not going to any page. They're just reading the snippet in that answer. Well, that answer was on a web page that was probably very high up in the search result anyway. because it was a reliable website,
Yeah.
hopefully, for the answer. Of course, there are hallucinations and other problems with, AI reliability, but that's a different conversation.
Oh, that's a very different conversation. Just on that very quickly, I have found that hallucinations are becoming less and less. Like,
Yeah.
personally.
Depends on what you're putting it in for.
Yeah, that's also true. Because there was a time in the early days where I'd be like, did you just make this up? And it would be like, I'm sorry. I didn't understand what you originally wrote. And so, yes, you did make it up. Whereas now, not happening as much. But that was always fun.
No,
So
it's
Joshua,
better.
how are you implementing AI in your business in Beltway Media?
Yeah, I use it. I don't hide that I use it.
Yeah.
It can't write final products. It can't produce final images. It can be really good at making what is essentially a detailed outline of an article. It's really good for that. It's really good for, doing competitor research and getting that first batch of information for a company. So if someone says, what kind of marketing are our, competitors doing? Well, who are your competitors? Well, in the past, I might have gone to Google and said, okay, list, IT firms or accounting firms, in the DC metro area. And that would be enough. Now I can put that into, an AI, into Claude, into Gemini, and have it say, here are, similar firms, and then say, give it a prompt. For all these firms, tell me, the last 5 pages posted to their website. Because hopefully, they're not creating a lot of leadership pages on a, regular basis unless they did a refresh. It'll be content. So it'll kind of give a sense of that. But it can't tell you what to do with that information necessarily. And if it does, it might not necessarily be right.
Sure. Yeah.
So that is a good starting point for a lot of things.
How about within your team?
That's how we use it.
I mean, internally.
Really,
So within Beltway, so not with clients, but between yourselves. Like, do you utilize it at all? Or
yeah.
Well, I guess the question there is, tell us about your team.
So the AI has been used for a couple of different things. I used it just recently, and it's started out by telling me a lot of wrong information. I needed to just go to a few websites for myself, our team, and get just basic information, web page details, page creation dates, things like that. Nothing super, hard to get that I couldn't do myself, but this was going to be a huge labor saver over the number of sites I needed it to do. So I put it all into, an AI. I said, here's how I want you to format the output. Here's the information it needed. It did one. It said, do you want to do the rest? On the Excel spreadsheet I gave it of, other companies that, things I'm looking at, pages I'm looking at. And I said, yes, go ahead and do it. It just kept going and spinning and making me wait. Eventually, after enough prompts, it says, I can't actually do that. It refers to itself as I. I can't actually do that because of this limitation on what you have to do. Like,
Interesting.
okay, new idea. AI, write me a Python script that will do this. And then I ran it locally. I had learned Python many years ago and couldn't write that script now, from scratch, if I had a month. But, I think this was on ChatGPT, gave me a result that was pretty good, 90% of what I needed within 10 minutes.
Wow.
Tested, deployed with the answers.
Yeah.
So I use it, and we use it in our team as a time saver. For things like that.
With what's your go-to OpenAI? I flick between Grok and Chat GPT. What do you find is best for you, or is it dependent on what you want it to do?
It's dependent, and I recently found this tool called Abacus useful, and it you're nodding like you know exactly the one I'm talking about. It has a thing where you put in the prompt and it routes your prompt to what it thinks is the best AI for your prompt.
Okay. I'm going to Google that right now.
So am
Yeah.
I. Please hold.
Yeah. And I have found that to be particularly useful because it has access to DeepSeek, it has Claude, it has ChatGPT, it has a couple others in there too. So that has been pretty helpful because then I don't need a lot of subscriptions. I have one, you know, per
Yeah.
user. And because we all have too many subscriptions to things these days.
Oh, definitely.
And this routes it based on, again, what its AI thinks will be the best AI. And if you're not getting a good answer, you can manually say, you know, if it ran in Claude, it says rerun in ChatGPT. And you can pick from each model, you know, all the different models that each platform provides.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that has been fairly helpful recently.
Why don't more people
because-
know about this? Well, they will now.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
They will
They
now.
will. But that has been a pretty useful tool recently.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see why. Can I, as much as I would love to talk about AI all day because I'm always so intrigued and, you know, week by week, everything is just changing so much. Can I switch gears and go into leadership
Yeah.
with you?
Sounds
Yeah. So how do you lead a global, I'm going to try that again.
Sounds good.
Yeah. How do you lead a globally distributed team effectively? Are there any systems or rituals that keep everything running smoothly?
Flexibility.
Flexibility?
You know,
Yeah.
we're doing it right now, you know, time zones.
Yeah.
You know, you and I are on very different time zones.
Very different
And-
time zones.
You know, just being able to, you know, respond to the people you need to,
Yeah.
you know, at different times. You know, sometimes I might have a middle of the night, super early, you know, web meeting.
Yep.
Sometimes it might be someone else who has it. You know, we can't obviously all have the perfect, you know, 11 a.m. time slot if we're in different time zones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the biggest one is just being flexible with, you know, time and commitment and understanding, okay, I sent that email now. It's, you know, 2, 3 p.m. Well, I'm not coming back. It's 4 a.m. This person's probably asleep.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Like,
know.
realistically, they're not awake checking their email right now. So, you know, understanding those things is really the biggest one. And once you're doing things virtually, it doesn't matter if someone's down the street or halfway around the world.
Yeah.
You know, sending a file is sending a file.
Yeah. It was kind of one of the only good things. I think there was 2 good things that came out of COVID
Mhm.
and all the lockdowns. And I mean, I'm sure you heard what it was like over here in Australia. We were pretty locked down. So, you know, working from home, I think it showed businesses that people could in fact do that and didn't need that
Yeah.
middle management lurking over, like micromanaging
Oh,
almost.
just all the new tools that
Well-
came out, the new
That was my next
platforms
point.
was
The new
amazing.
platforms that came out, and that now it is nothing to us that we're sitting here in Queensland, you're over there in DC, and it's we're just having a
easy.
chat. It's so simple. And it's just the norm now, isn't it?
It is. And definitely, you know, we all have, you know, in most places, very high speed internet that allows it.
That's right.
You know, to have this video chat working on my end and your end
Mm-hmm.
requires that we both have reliable high speed internet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
of course, there are too many people who don't have access to that. But where it is available, if I send a file, okay, if I'm sending it up the street or I'm sending it to you, you know, Queensland,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still sending a file. From my perspective, I'm dragging the file into the same window and it's sending.
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite unbelievable, isn't it? Oh, sorry.
No, all good. I was going to say, can you give us an example of some challenges that you've had recently with your team and working with them and I
Yeah.
know you're going to be flexible
So,
and I get that, but there's still going to be challenges and there's,
of course,
employees sometimes can be difficult because they have different priorities, but
everyone has,
yeah.
priorities and needs. I was working on one project and we were supporting a team in Central or Eastern Europe. They were based here, but they were traveling for like a month.
Sure.
So this was not a group that was as used to the time zone adjustments. And someone, miscalculated a time zone, which of course happens. And something, files didn't get where they were supposed to. You handle it, calmly in that situation. In the month of supporting a team in a different time zone that's normally in the same one as me, it's going to happen once or twice. Figure it out, move on. In that situation was how we handled it. Because realistically, what was the other choice?
Well, you
It
cannot
happened.
do it, can you, at that point?
Yeah, it happened.
Yeah.
It's just figure out why and, patch that error.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
So how about
Most
productivity
things,
with your team
Sorry?
members? How about productivity with your team members? Do they?
yeah, I use a lot of, I'm moving towards Airtable recently, which I'm figuring out. It has a lot of great things in there, but of also some really great simple tools. And that's been good for collaboration because, one thing that I do is I'm integrating with, a client's team. So whatever they're using, whatever their productivity suite is, I'm adopting it for that project.
Okay.
So we have to have everything. We'll
Yeah.
be able to have everything.
Sure.
So that's a little different than, just an agency model where you kind of do your thing and submit a result. Because with fractional, it's really integrated. So, that's how I ended up starting with Airtable. Was a project was on Airtable. So we're going to start using it because we got to learn how to get on Airtable pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But, Google Docs, synchronous editing, especially if we're not in the same room or the same time zone, we can both be in a document and looking at it. We could be on a video chat and, talking to each other, sharing that at the same time. So it's very much, just using a few basic tools, in effective ways. There's no silver bullet. It's going to come down to if people are going to adjust themselves to make it work.
How do you have team working from home as well?
Oh yeah, there are no offices.
There's no offices. So how do you outside of what you've just explained to us, that because the work from home culture it's changing. So I know, like, sort of during COVID and not long after and whatnot, it was a perk. People would advertise a job and one of the perks was
Yeah.
work from home or whatever it may be. But now there's an increasing amount of CEOs, GMs that want their team back in office. Now, you don't have the offices, that's fine. So that's obviously not an issue for your team.
Yeah.
But what's your just personal view on that? Because it's a big subject at the moment, and I feel like it's going to be a big subject for quite a while.
I don't think that topic is going away.
Yeah.
I think for some industries, you're going to see it a lot more than others. Some things never were really able to go fully remote. Healthcare is one, obviously. That, patient interaction is not going fully remote.
Yeah.
The billing office could be mostly remote, but patient interaction is going to be in person.
Yeah.
Someone I know at a financial firm said that people were coming in, fresh college graduates, and they struggled with kind of basic client interactions because they weren't learning it in person.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to certainly drive a little more, in-person thing.
Yeah.
One thing I've always said, if there's a great reason to be in person, I started my career in, news. That's a lot of in person.
Mm-hmm.
I was a cameraman, I was a producer. We're there. That's how that goes.
Yeah.
So if there's a reason to be there, we're there.
Yeah.
But if not, then I think a lot of people are, still questioning, I can do this, remotely. So why are we doing it in person? So I think that's going to be eventually kind of the big dividing line. And maybe I'll be wrong, and in 10 years, it'll be something completely different.
Yeah.
But, it's going to be, does this really need to be in person or not?
I think there's going to be this generational issue where we've had these, and my daughter, she was at the end of her schooling when we were in lockdown here. And there's this sort of generation that have finished off their schooling where it's been all online. And then they've gone into a work from home job. And personally, I find that like if you can have a hybrid situation is maybe the best, because there's that generation where, as you said, they don't necessarily know how to interact in person because they've missed a lot of that. And if you can have a hybrid situation, because a lot of the unscheduled mentoring that happens, say when you're making a coffee or you're walking down the hallway, or the little chit chats that you have that are just, they're
Social.
it's, that is, I think, invaluable. Like it needs to happen.
Well, I think, the people who kind of missed some of that, early career training was working with clients, was kind of what this person was telling me, was they never really sat in as, a first year, second year, employee on those in-person meetings.
Yeah.
So they didn't really see, in person how those happen because they were during that lockdown period where nothing was. So when they came in and now they were, fourth year, fifth year, they were, the more senior of the very junior staff, but, expected to know things that they just didn't get to pick up on.
Well, that's right.
And when you talk about that hybrid, that's why I think it's going to depend on, are we in the office, Tuesdays and Wednesdays because we decided we're going to be in the office Tuesday and Wednesday?
Yeah.
Or are we doing things that really necessitate us being here on these days? So that's where I think it's going to, and again, this is what I think is probably best, depend on the function. Is this function something we need to be in person for?
Yeah.
If it is, then we should all then do it. If not, then people are going to grumble about it and you probably won't get the best result from it.
Yeah.
So really focus on what you're doing and let that drive the decision rather than it's Tuesday, we're in an office on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Because, sitting in your Tuesday office and being on a Teams call because that's what you do, someone sits there, well, why am I doing this from here?
Yeah. Yeah. Fair. Yeah. It's a tricky and an interesting situation that we're currently sort of, and I think every business is wading through this together. And so far there doesn't seem to be a right or wrong answer. Everyone's just trying to figure it out. And I know, as I said, we speak to a lot of founders and CEOs and whatnot. And it's quite often a question of like, what is best for the staff? Because you want them to have that healthier life-work balance as well, which they get from working at home. They can quickly throw their laundry on or, give the kids a sandwich when they've walked in from school, but they're still getting their work done. So yeah, it's a tricky one, that's for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And like I said, with even with communications is you're going to be wrong. There'll be things that don't work. And there might, it might not be 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
There might not be a single right answer for every company. There might not be a single right answer per industry. It really might depend on that company and its particular needs and the staff and their particular needs.
Culture in the company and,
per company basis. And it might change over a year.
Yeah.
Depending on what's going on. So looking for the answer probably won't result in one.
Yeah.
Can I pivot the conversation a little bit,
No.
please? I looked into your LinkedIn profile a little bit, and I did notice that you've had quite a bit of experience publicly and privately. I mean, government sector and with private sector. Can you tell us some of the key differences and maybe some of the key similarities too in terms of what Beltway Media is doing for them?
Yeah. So I definitely say one of the big difference is speed and bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more speed on the private side, especially with the smaller mid-sized companies that I deal with, and a lot more bureaucracy on the government side.
Yep.
So those two things are probably the biggest differences. And of course, there are good reasons for a lot of that bureaucracy on the government side. It prevents things like, using the government travel card to book your family's vacation to Disney World. It prevents that.
Yeah.
There are reasons for that bureaucracy. But another big one is, especially smaller mid-sized companies looking for investment. In some cases, they're very conscious of that this is their money that they have to raise, that it's in the door, it might not get that next round. Whereas in government, it's at least in the US, at the federal level, it's congressional appropriations. So it's a very different way of getting money. And the people who work in government, from what agencies I was in, are very mindful that they are working with, limited taxpayer dollars.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's, a very different way of obtaining that money, where you're going to Congress every year versus, trying for the next fundraising round, selling products for money, getting app subscriptions, for money that are recurring. So in that sense, it's also very different. But both are, very mindful of the dollars they get.
No worries. And how about in terms of your projects and for clients?
Yeah.
The communication styles and how you deliver.
Communication styles can be very different. When you're the government, you are speaking as the government. It is much more formal, at least where I was. It was a very direct, way of speaking. Whereas with some private sector companies, they're willing to have fun with some stuff because it doesn't come with, the hand of, the signature of the government on it.
Yeah.
So they might, be willing to, be a little more fun and try a couple different things and understand that, okay, if it didn't work, we'll try a different tone. That's fine, because it's not coming from, the U.S. Department of Justice, which has a very different, seal on it than, Acme Corp, trying to create a social media campaign. But both do social media campaigns. Both do things to get money. They do investor relations, reports to the, appropriating body, Congress. That's there to get money. Same way that you do investor relations reports in the private sector. They look different. They feel a little different, but ultimately it's the same goal and including pretty much the same information.
Mm. Looking back over from when you started Beltway Media, what was your most explosive year of growth and what were the critical drivers for that?
Oh, God.
Dun, dun, dun. I thought I'd throw you a curly one.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of the year, it was somewhere in the 20 teens. I couldn't pin down what exact year it was.
Yeah.
But it was definitely kind of working with one or two earlier startups that definitely gave me a lot more insight into how that industry functioned. And in terms of math and numbers, maybe not the most explosive. In terms of experience and what I learned in those years,
Yep.
definitely paid off a lot because it was really working with a lot of, very smart people
Mm-hmm.
who, brought in some significant communications challenges and, figuring out how to work with them. And they knew their stuff.
Yeah.
These were very smart people, but getting it explained to people like investors who equally smart, not science and engineering backgrounds in some
Yeah.
cases. So really understanding how to translate, between these groups was probably one of the most important things I learned that year.
And you went boom.
Yeah.
You did.
So maybe not the most explosive in terms of, dollars and numbers,
Yeah.
but in terms of it's still one of those things, however many years later it is now, that is, paying dividends.
Yeah. It's put you on the trajectory that you've gone forward and had that explosion with. Joshua, we're getting towards the end, and I'm wondering if we can do a bit of a rapid fire question situation.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Let's try it.
All right, let's do it. What's the wildest client request you've ever gotten?
Skywriting.
What?
Yep. Skywriting. Someone wanted skywriting.
Oh, skywriting. Really? Does that work?
Did you pull it off?
No, we did not do it.
Yeah, I can't imagine that would be, yeah. Okay.
All right.
He
What's a book?
figured
Sorry.
he had an idea for a captive audience. They were there. He could, people look up at it, and that was the idea. We did not do it.
Yeah.
The price of skywriting is much more than he thought it was when he had the idea.
Oh, so you went through the whole process and investigating and...
I mean, enough of a Google search for skywriters.
I was like, yeah, nah, let's flick this idea.
Right. What's a book or media that shaped how you think about communication?
Oh, a book media. Your podcast. Definitely.
Yes. Can I'm going to make a clip out of that.
I hear you.
If you had to sum up today's comms landscape in one sentence, what would it be?
Fractured.
Oh, yeah. I like that. Look at that. Straight off the top of your head, too. Love it. That's it. Your rapid fire's over. Unless you want
Phew.
more.
Well, can I ask one more thing?
good.
Oh, okay. Dan's
Just
got another one.
Rapid fire, or do I get more than a
No,
sentence?
rapid fire is kind of. Just give us a quick summary of Beltway Media.
It is fractional communications leadership focused on shaping perspective and building and maintaining trust long term.
Perfect. Love it.
Love it. Thank you so much. So, Joshua, it's been an absolute pleasure. I will have all your links down below for everyone to contact you and reach out to you. Thank you so much for staying up later, because it's not
pleasure.
even it's your yesterday for us and we're in tomorrow for you. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Thanks, Josh. Bye.
Bye-bye.
To help support our continued mission to provide free, best-in-class advice from the world's most compelling business leaders, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you never miss an episode. See you on Saturday. Thanks for tuning into The Business Game. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn to stay connected. A big thank you to our partner, HubSpot, for powering today's episode. And join us again on the next episode of The Business Game, a podcast that moves the needle.